Welcome back. Today we are going to dive into our third little Christmas themed watercolor tutorial. Thank you so much for coming back if you've been doing the other tutorials along with me, and I so appreciate you coming to hang out and do a little bit of painting and sketching with me. Let's dive in. So the first thing we're going to do is draw a rectangle. I've got my rectangle on an angle here, and it's going to be a pile of presents. So underneath that rectangle, coming out of the left side, I'm going to do a larger rectangle. And I'm just using an erasable Col-Erase, Prismacolor Col-Erase pencil crayon. They are fantastic for being able to erase, and you don't have that gray line everywhere, which I don't mind, but the colored line adds a nice different touch to it. You can see on the top box here, I basically drew two lines that look like they're going to recede towards a point. So they're not parallel. The sides of the boxes are not parallel. They're angled in as if they will eventually hit a vanishing point. Every box that I'm drawing here has a different vanishing point. I'm not getting into perspective here, but basically you can see me angling the sides of the boxes towards one another. So if you haven't learned perspective, that's kind of an easy cheat, is to draw these angles of the sides of the boxes as if they're going to be basically farther apart the closer they are towards you. And then as they go farther away, those lines will eventually touch, so they're going to go towards one another. You could always pause the video here. I know I'm going a little quickly, but you can pause the video here to try to sort of copy the lines that I'm doing. For this top box, you can see those lines on the side. They don't go really towards one another. They're both kind of going, slanting off to the left. And it's just because we are not looking straight down at the box, we're looking at it from the side, so it changes the angle. Drawing a little very simple bow here with two loops and two tails. Going up the side of the box here, across the front, two loops and two tails. Then I'm going to take that line. I'm also going to go around the sides of the box too. So you can see me angling it. When the ribbon goes around the side of the box, it's going to be at a different angle than what you see at the top. So you can see I'm making the little angle there. I don't actually know how to tie bows on presents. I'm really bad at it, but drawing them is simple enough. You just change the angle of the line as it hits the edge of the box. So around the side there, it just curves a little bit. We don't even really see the side of that box that I just drew the bow on, but I still curved the ribbon around it, almost like it's coming off of the box a little. These little tiny subtleties will help make it look more three-dimensional. So I know it's faint. I apologize for that. But here you can see I only did the cross, both directions on the smaller presents, and the two larger ones I just left them with a bow tied around one side of the box, not doing the, X. So I'm going to start with mixing some blue. You can do these presents any color you want. I end up doing mine sort of blue and coral or blue and peachy pink, but you might want to do yours green and red to stay more traditional. I'm using some cobalt blue, and this has a bit of it almost looks turquoise, a little bit turquoisey, and that could be because I had a bit of phthalo green on my palette already that's kind of blending in with that blue. So I'm just avoiding the ribbon. I'm painting kind of around it. You don't have to do this. You could just do your ribbon later darker and just paint it over top of the dry top of the present color, but I decided to go around the bows and just avoid it. I've mixed a slightly darker, just so slightly, but I've mixed a darker value for the sides. I always tell my students that where there's a change of plane, like change of surface, there's going to be a change of value, because light will not hit all of the sides of that box evenly. There's no way. So look for those subtleties when you are looking at three-dimensional objects, and look for the different values. This is just a gray. I've mixed it with some shadow violet, and I believe it's just shadow violet pretty much, but you can mix yourself a gray. Often if you mix the primary colors, you get different variations of neutrals, so you could mix a red, yellow, and blue to get sort of a murkier neutral color, and then if you just tweak it, you can get different browns and grays. I find that ultramarine blue mixed with burnt umber, the brown, kind of makes a nice black color, and then you could just water that down. I ended up painting over the bow thing just for, I guess, some consistency. And I'll just add the bow on top later. I can still see the drawing though. You might have a hard time seeing it on the video, but I can still see where the initial drawing is. And I do the same with this. When I'm doing this gray and touching it next to the blue, you kind of have to leave like the smallest bit of white between them, or just be prepared for them to sort of bleed into each other. That's part of the joy of watercolor though, is letting these things happen, letting a little bit of play happen. So if you want to gently touch two different colors together in areas on your watercolor, some magical things can happen. I'm making this just a slightly different color of blue. If I were to paint this scene again, or paint this little still life again, I think I will choose some more traditional colors, because the design we're doing today could be birthday presents. Doesn't have to be Christmas. And I think if you want to make specifically festive Christmas cards, yeah, you might choose red and green. You might choose blue and then put little snowflake pattern on the paper. I'm mixing a medium, sort of cadmium medium yellow with the red there, and trying to get sort of a peachy color. I don't really want it to be orange, and I don't really want it to be red. I love the combo of turquoise and coral. I don't know why. So you can do these presents any color you'd love. You can see me adding a bit of that quinacridone rose with the blue to make a gray. So I made it kind of like a purple, and then added a teeny bit more blue, possibly a little dab of brown. So I'm going to do another gray present here. And the last one, I'm going to make this peachy coral color. I'm just using my size 8 brush. You can use any size that suits you, but don't go too small. You want to be able to hold enough water in the brush. So here's the basic first layer wash on all of the presents. And now I'm using a lot of ultramarine, and I'm going to try to You can see my hair in this shot, sorry, but I'm trying to add the edges to the present. I want to make them, as I said earlier, I want to make them darker, or another value. Value referring to the lightness or darkness of a color. Another word for color is hue. So if you hear me saying hue, I mean color. If you hear me saying value, I mean lightness and darkness. So this 8 is, because it's a round and it has that point, I can do some fine detail with it as well as cover larger areas. You can see the cards that I'm painting on are quite large though. They're not, 4x6 tiny cards. They're closer to 5x7, I think. You can kind of see relative to the size of my hand that they're quite large. And so if you have a small card you're working on, you might go down to a 6. So right now I'm not actually painting the ribbon. I'm painting the shadow of the ribbon because I know where that ribbon's going to go. So I just painted the shadow, and then later I will drop the ribbon down right above that shadow. You want your shadow to stay on the same side of the ribbon and present. For this present, I'm doing the darker value on the top, and I'm going to leave the side a little lighter. So now I'm mixing a darker coral for the shadows on this box, and I'm making the sides of the box darker because they're kind of below the other presents, and the other presents are casting shadow on the side of this box. When you are trying to make a straight line, do not be afraid to just rotate your whole page like I just did. It really helps to just move your page so that you can have the best angle for whichever hand you're using. I'm doing, I've mixed the darker coral, and I'm doing the shadow of this ribbon. Nothing fancy, just quick and very simplistic. And here's some more of my shadow violet, and I'm going to just lay in the shadows of this ribbon as well. It is an unusual way to work. Normally you would draw the ribbon first and add the shadow later, but at this point I wasn't sure if I was going to do a totally different medium for the ribbon or not. So, and it's very easy shadowing, right? It's just on the same side of where I had the drawing of the ribbon. So I'm mixing the shadow violet, and there is a little bit of blue in there, and I'm just going to drop in some shadow on the actual surface that these presents are sitting on, so on the table or on the ground, and I'm going to drop them all in sort of below and to the left of all the presents, which is the same place where I've dropped in the shadows for all those ribbons. And right here, I'm even putting in some of the shadow that present is casting onto the other presents. So very, very, very simply dropping it in. Normally in that little area that I just did, there would be a different angle that the shadow would hit each present, but I'm being super simplistic here. And this whole little area down there is going to be in shadow. So this whole little area is going to be in shadow, and adding, oh, they're making mistakes, and fixing it easily with paper towel. And adding this simple shadow beside all these presents helps it look just slightly more realistic, or just more three-dimensional, I should say. This isn't a truly realistic painting because, as you'll see now, I emphasize light in a different way on each present. So here I am making the top of this present kind of look like it's more in shadow than the side. It's getting less light. But then on the other one, I realized very quickly, oh, the top is lighter than the side. So they're not uniform, you could say. Now that might be the change like of the angle. The present on the right is on a different angle. But nevertheless, they look three-dimensional enough and have a good base of different values, so we're ready to start adding some more detail. So here I have my Posca Paint Pen. This is an acrylic-based paint, so it's water-based. You have to kind of pay attention if you're just going to go out and buy random paint markers, that they're not oil-based, because some Sharpie ones are oil-based, and that's going to do different things to your paper and your surface for sure. So I'm just going to add in blue ribbons here. I didn't do any shadowing for the ribbon on this small present to the right. And I did add cross ribbons for the two big presents. So they all have cross ribbons going both ways across the present. So I pulled out my colored pencil here. This is just the Col-Erase, Prismacolor Col-Erase. And I started to lay it in red around where I had the shadows, and I didn't love it. So I went with pink Posca Paint Pen, and I first had to clean it because when you use these over top of other stuff, sometimes they pick up a bit of that color. So my pink pen was dragging sort of bluish brown around, so I had to clean it off on this spare piece of paper. So test out your paint pens on a scrap piece of paper beside you before you lay them into your actual piece here. So I'm just laying in the line of paint right on top of, top right of the shadows. Then I'm grabbing this, just a little cheapo brush. It's not a watercolor brush. And some of the extra acrylic paint that daubed onto my scrap there, and I'm making the little knot of the bow. Small detail, not necessary, but using the red colored pencil, I'm going to color in the ribbons on these gray presents. I almost chose blue, but then I decided that we needed to kind of spread the color around a little bit to make the composition more balanced. So since there was only one warm colored present, like one of the sort of coral colored, adding more blue to these gray presents would have made that one present kind of unbalanced in the composition, maybe take too much attention or look out of place. So by adding in some red somewhere else in the drawing, we are dealing with color balance. Now I'm using the colored pencil just to enhance the shadow for this pink ribbon, because when I added that marker, it was quite thick and it covered up a bit of that shadow that we had painted on. So I'm just going to sketch it in now. I'm really enjoying adding colored pencil to my watercolor. I think I'm going to be doing that a lot more in the future. It brings some control back to you, because watercolor doesn't always give you a lot of control, but pencils really do. Next, I sort of emphasize all of the shadows with blue colored pencil for all of the blue Posca paint pen we used. The shadows are there, but enhancing them with this colored pencil really works. You can see on this last little loop that the shadow doesn't quite line up with it's not right next to the ribbon, and so it kind of looks like the ribbon's held up off of the box. And then I'm just sort of outlining really in a very kind of sketchy way. That it's not perfect, but I'm bringing a sketchy element back in and crisping up this drawing a little bit. So I'm going around the lines that I had painted in. Then I just switched to the lighter blue so that I can outline the gray presence in a bit of a different color. I want to keep all three of the different present colors kind of separate from each other. So I'm just kind of outlining, and it helps emphasize those linear perspective lines, like the sides of the presents and how they're angled towards one another. And I continue along. I want the whole thing to be cohesive. So any treatment that I do to one present, I should probably do to all the others. So got my red colored pencil in here, and I'm also kind of correcting a shadow there. The gray kind of puddled into the present, and I wanted to make it more red. So there you go. I'm grabbing my jelly roll in size 8 and 10. I've always found that 10 works a little bit better. There's more flow because the ballpoint's bigger. So I have way more luck with the size 10 than I do with the other like 6 and 8. And I'm just putting little asterisks all over this, sort of looking like the simplest snowflakes, to make it kind of look like it's patterned Christmas paper. You don't have to have a jelly roll for this. You could write these in with colored pencil or marker of any kind. It doesn't really stand out as much on the pale blue, but it really stands out on the shadowed side of the presents. And it's one of those details that's just minute but cute. I'm going to add some highlight to this ribbon. This little kind of detail is not necessary, but really packs a punch to the overall effect. So I'm doing a simple light line on top of the Posca pen, the light color, not on top of the shadow, just on the side of the actual ribbon. And it's not everywhere, but little hints of it. I'm using this scrap piece of paper to test my color as I mix it. And I have decided that this whole top of the present is just a little too pale. So I'm going to darken it just a little with more coral. Less of a peach, more of a coral, as you can see from the little test swatches on the scrap paper. I was careful not to kind of go over the Posca Paint pen. I don't know that it would, I bet you it would bleed. I haven't tried that, but I imagine dragging water over top of the acrylic paint would possibly mess it up a little bit. There you go. I'm liking it. I'm liking it a lot. I hope you like it. And I hope you get creative with it. You can do all sorts of patterns, and you can do different shapes of presents. But I had a lot of fun doing this. So there you go. We've got our second and third Christmas themed watercolor and mixed media paintings. Thank you for joining me for this week's watercolor tutorial. I hope you'll come back next week for yet another painting session together. Please share this with anyone you think might be interested in this little series. I so appreciate you spreading the word.